Drink with James, episode 14. Hamptons edition, as promised. Episode 14, Drink with James is here. The wait is over. The special guest here, Laney Crowell, whose name I've mispronounced for 5 or 6 years now. And we're in Sag Harbor in the heart of the Hamptons in what I think, and you agree, is the rosé capital of the world. Yeah. Well, outside of Provence, maybe.
I mean, we just call it water here. So.
This is another first. You know, we had JC a couple episodes ago. This is our first brand guest to join us. Laney runs her own consultancy. She helps some of the world's best brands create social content and work with influencers and all this great stuff. And before that, she worked for one of the largest beauty brands in the world. So we're going to be asking a few questions. I'm going to try and not talk, and we're going to try and let Laney talk so you guys can learn a little bit from the brand side of what it's like to work with influencers. So a lot of people who watch the show are emerging bloggers, right? In that they're kind of just still getting started, they're starting to work with brands, and they're anxious to know more. And you know, we often say on the show that like it makes sense for emerging influencers to work with emerging brands, but you know, there are larger brands that want to work with emerging influencers. And one, is that a trend you're seeing more of big household brands looking to work with people who have less than maybe 50,000 followers? And if so, is there a way that those influencers can position themselves more effectively to work with those big brands?
Totally. I think right now is a great time for emerging bloggers because so many brands are saying to me, you know, I love so-and-so, but they've worked with so many brands at this point. You know, who's new? So that's a trend I'm seeing everywhere. I also think that brands aren't so caught up on followers anymore. I think that if you have a platform that is beautifully curated and you have great content, the brand's going to respond to that. And honestly, I think influencers with way less than 50,000 followers are being looked at.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's really about if the content and the person is on brand.
So how do you, I mean, you're, you know, a 4-card client, thank you, and have been for years, but
one of the first.
One of the first,
yep.
With your old global beauty brand and now with, you know, with your consultancy as well. How are you, you know, being a leader in the space that you are, how do you stay on top of like who's new and interesting when it's not 4-card?
I would say good old-fashioned trolling is probably the best way. I spend a lot of time on all social platforms, and the second I see someone tagged that I don't know, I go to their site, I scroll through it, I screen grab it if I feel like it's right. I think I read a lot of the sites into the gloss. Actually, Sakara Life is a great one. There's all these websites out there that are profiling amazing women. And so a lot of times I'll go onto there and read their articles and see who they're looking at. Because they don't really care so much about followers. They're just looking to see if someone's doing something interesting. And that's what I look for first and foremost.
So we've talked about it on a past show, actually. It's interesting you say that of just like things that brand, like you said, if someone tags someone, you kind of go and look at that. And we've encouraged people to try and work with those brands, those kind of cool brands that people go to like source talent. So would you suggest like trying to get, like if it's Glossier, let's say, like trying to work with them, not charging them, trying to get in there for free just so you can be seen as this kind of interesting person that this interesting brand is working with? And I guess like to refine my rambling question, like is it important to align yourself with those kind of really interesting brands in the beginning so you can set yourself up?
I think two things. I think one thing we're kind of talking about but dancing around a little bit is the interesting. Being interesting.
Right?
It's really important. And I think people get really caught up in like looking cute. It's actually way more appealing for brands to be an interesting person and to be well-rounded and to do interesting things, not just take selfies.
Right.
So what are your hobbies? Are you a photographer? Are you a painter? Do you love making cheese plates for your family? That's
a great point, because our clients are also all the time asking us like, we want someone who's not just an influencer, you know, which is in some ways a little bit disparaging to influencers because what they do is interesting. But I think the point is what you're saying, like they want to see your personality. And we see that with Snapchat being so popular now. It's like people actually want to know you.
People want to know you. People want to know what sets you apart. A lot of times brands want to feature an influencer not just to get more traffic, but to bring their product to life. So how do you bring a product to life? You align yourself with someone that it makes sense for. So a red lipstick. We're going to align ourselves with this influencer because they paint in the color red exclusively. And like, what an interesting story.
Yeah, I'm into it.
And that's so much better than just someone that wears makeup.
Wears a red lip a lot of times. Yeah.
So I think stuff like that is really, really key, especially for those up and coming influencers and personalities, because really brands aren't that into their follower count if the story's great.
Right. I think most good photographers are just interesting people. They have interesting friends, they get themselves into interesting situations. So I think it's like, that's a really good point of that. Like, it's also something you can't fake. You can't say, oh, I'm gonna just paint in the color red because I think that eventually I'll be able to work with a beauty brand to promote this new red lipstick. Like, you just have to be yourself, right?
Be you. And I think that authenticity is so real. I think in general, just thoughtfulness and being real are probably the number one most important things.
Which is interesting to hear from a brand perspective, because I feel like a lot of influencers feel like the pressure is to not be real, to be super curated.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on past emerging influencers, you've obviously worked with the biggest bloggers in the world as well. And I think something we're seeing more and more of the really savvy influencers is setting up year-long contracts. I think it's great for the brand, right? Because you get this, this kind of consistent posting over a year, and it's great for the influencer because, well, one, it's guaranteed money over the course of a year, but they give their audience a chance to really like get to know that brand.
Yeah.
So is that something with your clients? Is that something that you're pushing more of? And if so, is there some advice for people on how they can set those kinds of partnerships up?
It's interesting because I'm not seeing as many of those partnerships as I used to. I think that it might be due to just budgets not being as big as they used to. It might be because brands are a little bit overwhelmed by all of the influencers, so it's hard for them to say, we're gonna lock in on this one. I'm not totally sure why. I do think though that, and this is advice that applies to every situation, is that if you have a genuine interest in a brand, talk about it, post about it. If you have 10 followers, I honestly reached out to someone the other day who had 100 followers because they were posting about a brand that I work for, and they post about it all the time, and they love this brand, and so
That's cool.
I wanted to send them product.
Yeah.
And so,
did they like completely flip out?
oh yeah, but I do that a lot.
But that's gotta be so
message
nice,
people
right?
All the time, because I just think as someone that works for a brand, I'm genuinely thankful.
Right.
And that's the other thing to think about, is that when you're an influencer and you're thinking about a brand, you actually should be thinking about appealing to a person, because that's the person that's going to hire you. So act in a way that is mindful of that. So
like the idea that behind every brand's Instagram account is just one person?
Yeah, so realize that someone's going to see you posting about their product. I got a message the other day from someone who I had sent product to, and they never posted about it, and their agent emailed me and said, so do you want to do something paid? And my reaction was like, well, no, because clearly she's not a fan. She has the product, she has the opportunity, if she cares about the brand, to post about it. And I don't want to recommend anyone for a brand that doesn't genuinely care about it. So if you want to work with a brand once, or you want to work with a brand over a long period of time, my advice is to show real interest in the brand.
That's amazing. So that actually brings up another question I think a lot of influencers ask, is that obviously when they're starting out, they're not charging, right? Can you move that relationship? Can you reach out to me and say, I want to send you some product, and I post about that, and I love the brand, so I post about it a few times. Can you move that relationship to a paid relationship? Because I think the concern is, well, if I do it for free once, they'll never want to pay me. Is that an unfounded fear?
Yeah, totally. I think that a brand, if a brand reached out to you and you work with them for free, and you do an awesome job on it, the brand's not going to think to themselves, oh great, we get more stuff for free. They're going to think, wow, this is beautiful, we should think of something bigger, especially if it really translates to traffic or sales or anything.
Right. I think that, and is there any kind of best practices for you? Like, again, let's just use a very real example and say you send me something and I post about it. Like, are there any best practices that influencers can do? Should they send you an email afterwards with the post? Like, what can they do to make your job easier so that you want to work with them?
Definitely, especially with the new algorithm on Instagram, it's not possible really for me to see everything unless I'm going specifically to an account. So if you post about something, send me an email and say, hey, I posted about this, I love this product, here's some feedback I got from my followers, here's how it resonated, I'd love to try something else. I would just reach out to whomever sent you the product, right away.
Right.
So that they can react.
That's great. And I think another question, and I told you like 3-4 questions I was going to ask you, and I've totally gone off script because like this is amazing, and like the advice, the advice you're giving, I think people are going to eat this up, so I appreciate it. But is it like, I think a lot of influencers wonder, should they be pitching you ideas? Like, okay, you sent me some product, I posted about it, I said, hey, I did this, it looks great. But if I have an idea, should I be sending you that idea? Should I be waiting for you to come back to me with something and try and expand it? Like, how can I expand my relationship? Like, how can I take my gifting relationship I have with you and expand it?
I would love to hear ideas. I mean, I think I wouldn't get discouraged if something doesn't work out, just because, as we all know in life, timing is everything. But I would love to hear ideas from someone. It never happens, but I would absolutely love it. Oh yeah, I sometimes get notes saying I'd love free product, which is hard to kind of react to that in a meaningful way. But I think an idea is awesome. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people are sometimes well, one, there's the problem of like, how do you find the person? Like, you controlled a lot of different strings at this kind of a very large brand, but like, if you didn't know you, it can be hard to see like, how do I get in there? I have an idea for this brand, but is one way to do it by just direct messaging or by just posting and tagging consistently? And if that brand has a social media person who's good at their job, they should probably eventually reach out, right?
Yeah. I also think working with people like Forecard is really important, and working with...
Boom!
But seriously, I found a lot of influencers through Forecard that I never would have found otherwise. I think networking in all regards is super important. Going to events, talking to people, working with other influencers, just as much as you can get out there, the better, because a lot of that times I find someone because they're tagged in a photo or they're tagging the brand.
Right.
I found a lot of people because they tagged the brand.
Yeah.
Be authentic and, tag brands that you really care about, come up with ideas that are really interesting to you, do things you're really interested in, but also just don't look at it so transactionally. Like, I'll do this if you pay me.
Right.
Or I'll do this so I get something. I think that's a little bit of a turnoff to brands. If that makes sense.
Let's say I find your email and I know you represent X brands and I want to work with them. What should my first email look like? And let's say I have 100,000 followers. So I've got a decent amount. Let's say I know I'm making money from other brands. What should my first email to you look like? Should it be, here's a project I want and here are my rates? Like what's the best way to reach out, do you think?
I think, again, I probably would be a little bit more gentle than that, and I'd probably email and say, I would want to receive an email that says something like, hey, I see you working with these brands. I'm a genuine fan of X, Y, and Z brand.
Here's examples of my posts.
Here's examples of my posts. Here's an example of how we could work together. Here's an idea I've had for a while about doing a post on natural skincare and doing a roundup and maybe interviewing a product developer. Something like that, and then that would really pique my interest.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to followers, yes, I get excited about seeing a big follower count, but I get way more excited about meeting someone that has great content and is genuine. Okay. So regardless if you have a ton of followers, or if you don't have a ton of followers, that email would genuinely
Drink with James. We're a couple glasses of rosé in. Like this stuff happens.
Look the same.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm not so persuaded by followers. I think, especially the way things are going with social media, it doesn't matter so much.
Yeah.
I'm more interested if someone's right for the brand that I work with. I think advocates have a huge role, and I think advocates are basically pre-influencers is the way I think of them, or brand influencers. I found them because they just kept tagging the brand on Instagram, and I look at that really closely every day.
Yeah.
And I like every photo that, or I have my community manager like every photo that a brand is mentioned in, and then if it's a great photo, generally we're regramming it, and if we're going to regram it, then I want to see who's creating this photo that's on brand. I mean, right then and there, it's like, you love the product, perfect. It's on brand. Who is this? Who's the person behind the photo?
Yeah.
So you're literally going through every photo that the brand is tagged in.
Yeah, I think most brands do.
Yeah. I think that's like something people don't realize sometimes. Is like, that is, it can feel frustrating, as we were talking about before, of being like, I don't live in New York City. I don't know the people that are, run PR for all of these brands, but like, you can, like, people do look at every single photo, and there is a person who runs social. And I know I used to do this a little bit when I was, still in that influencer space, was you can also try and figure out who is that person.
Yep.
Who is that person who does social for X brand that you want to work with, and start following them.
Totally.
Right? And start, I'm sure you've seen that. And,
Yeah.
and in some
I
ways
do,
you're probably like, okay, I see what you're doing. Like, kudos to you, but like,
But if someone does that, I say to myself, you're smart.
Yeah. So like, if you can
Yeah.
find that person who's doing social with the brand, maybe start following them and interacting with them as well, because they're the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Right?
And the other thing I was going to say is, think of it almost as an asset that you don't live in New York to some extent, because brands are always saying to me, okay, we want to feature someone, but they can't be in New York, LA, or San Francisco. We need people from other places, because we're sick of working with people in all these big cities. We want someone that's more interesting, like we talked about before, and different.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, there's obviously that's the beautiful thing about the internet and the influencers. Like, the country is huge.
Yeah.
And it used to just be like New York, LA. Right now, it's quite a bit more democratized, which is great. So, I think my last slew of questions.
Okay.
I just remembered what I was going to ask.
Rapid fire.
It's actually going to be you rapid fire, not me. But
okay.
the interesting thing about, like, you and I, like, grew up in corporate worlds, right? Like, we both
For
worked
better or for worse.
For better or for worse. We grew up. We had bosses.
Yep.
Like, and I think certainly a lot of influencers still have their jobs, and we celebrate the quitter stories, and I love those stories of people who quit. You recently quit your job. It's an amazing thing.
I'm a quitter.
You're a quitter. It's an amazing thing to be able to quit your job and do what you love. But there's some people who've been fortunate enough to from the start, never have to have a job and do this. And I think sometimes what happens is you lose that initial training of just like business, like how to conduct business, because that's not something you're just born with.
Yep, of course.
So do you have some just like quick do's and don'ts as an influencer in their interactions with brands as to like how to like be more effective?
Totally. I think, and I've heard you guys talk about this before in other Drinks with James, overperform. And don't do it just to do it because you genuinely are enjoying what you're doing. I think that's how you should conduct yourself probably in every aspect of life, 110% all the time.
Yeah, so overperform.
You're not going to get promoted anywhere, in corporate life or not corporate life, unless you're overperforming.
Right, it's a really good point, actually. If this is a job,
yeah,
and you just did your job at the bare minimum of what people asked you to do, you wouldn't be successful.
Nope.
You need to go above and beyond.
You probably get fired, actually.
You probably, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. I've never thought of it that way. So that's a big do. Any big don't?
Big don't. I mean, don't be an asshole. That's probably my biggest don't.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe like what we were talking about before, like don't send that email like, hey, I want to work with you. Here's like, how can I get free product? Or here are my rates. I want to do a post with you.
Yeah, I think And this is part of why I started my company, was because I really genuinely believe that there is a space for thoughtful social media and thoughtful influencer marketing, and that's being lost on both sides of the equation right now. So I believe that the best way to conduct yourself is to be thoughtful. So don't send out a blanket email to lots of people and expect to get responses if it's like a generic email form. Don't receive product and then turn around and say, give me money.
Right.
That feels not good to anyone.
So like, if you do receive that product,
if you like it,
post about it
or talk about it. And the great thing right now is with social is there's Snapchat, there's other platforms than just Instagram or your blog, so you don't have to feel like you're doing something major. You can talk about it on various channels without it feeling like you're doing some huge content creation photo shoot for a brand that's not paying you.
Right. That's great. I think we've taken up enough of your time, and
I feel like I could
the helicopters. I know the helicopters are coming. It's Thursday night in the Hamptons. People richer than me are flying in. We came in a rental car. If you have questions for Laney, put them in Facebook, put them in YouTube comments. She will be looking, and she will either answer you.
Comment on my Instagram.
Yeah, comment on her Instagram, which is right here. Ding, ding, ding. Tim will also put it in the beginning of the video as well, Tim. Just like randomly. So that like random thing that popped up like 10 minutes ago, that's because I just said that now. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
and we're gonna
hear any questions.
Yeah.
I'm always...
Send your questions as always. We're gonna finish rosé.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.